Hey everybody, so this is my newly revised video on how to set up a Shimano 5801, R8000 and R9100 front derailleur. Before we get into that, it's important to understand how these work. There are four distinctive positions as shown here on the Shimano schematic. So when you're actually using it, it takes one throw to push it all the way up, but each click there, that's your top trim, then you got your low, and then your low trim. So this is an older Ultegra 6800 first generation 11 speed. You can tell by the long arm there. So great derailleur, worked really well. The downfall was that the initial pull ratio, you can see where that little spoke is, trying to pull straight down from there. Sometimes it was really difficult for, people with smaller hands, or, on some frames it was just really difficult to get the throw started. I'll get to this bit in a minute, but that's the little stabilization screw, which was often neglected on this one and the newer version as well. So we'll get into setting that up. But basically, functionality between the two is exactly the same. The exception, the newer one, rather than pulling a big arm lever down, it kind of has a little twisting action there. But the pull ratios and all of that are the same. Size-wise, it looks like it might be a little more arrow. The links are spread a little further apart, so it probably has a little better stability overall. But they're both a little different to set up. The initial 11-speed versions were somewhat difficult to start with, and then this is a little different setup. But once you do a few, it's actually pretty easy. Works really well. So got the little cap there that holds the cable. So anyway, tools you're going to need are a little 2mm hex key, 4mm hex key, and a 5mm hex key. And then I also like to use just a set of pliers or something to kind of pull that the inner wire tight when I'm cinching it down. So first step you want to do is just kind of loosely mock up the derailleur there on the frame. So that's basically the cable's going to cinch down under there. Its inner wire is going to come through that little hole, and you have the option to either run under a cable guide under the frame or whatever, or straight housing to that little hole there. So, anyway, there's a little groove that the wire is going to connect into, going to come out and wrap around there. But before we get to that, this is location of your low and high limit screws. So you kind of want to familiarize yourself with where those are at. And first thing, we kind of just want to mock it up, get an indicator for we're going to put our little silver stainless steel backing plate there, and that's so the little stabilization screw is going to push into that instead of pushing into your nice carbon frame. So kind of what I like to do, well, I'll just kind of show you here as far as, as you tighten that in, you can kind of see that little screw protruding through the derailleur, and it's going to butt right up to the frame. And the basic reasoning with this is that when you're shifting from the small ring to the big ring, it puts a lot of stress on that derailleur. This is just a bike that I back the screw off, and you can see how much it flexes there. And when we basically cinch that back down, it really improves the shifting capabilities of this derailleur. So usually what I like to do is just kind of thread that in with the derailleur basically kind of set where it's going to be, and you can either eyeball it, or I like to just do that and put just a little score there on the frame, and then I know right where to put the little pad there, the little steel pad. And so once you get that up on there, what you'll want to do is then just position your derailleur back where it normally would be. You want the outer edge of the the outer plate there to clear the biggest place on your big chain ring there by 1 to 5 millimeters here. So kind of just cinching it down here, and before you do anything with the stabilization screw, you're cinching that in place. You want the tail end of the front derailleur to be just slightly angled back. The Shimano manual calls for half a degree to 1 degree. Sometimes I like to do slightly more, but cinch it down there, and then take your 2mm hex, and then you'll basically just tighten that thing down to where the outer edge there is just, you know, in the same plane with your big chain ring. So get that cinched down. I think it's 5 to 7 Newton meters is what they call for. So here we are tightening our stabilization screw up against the little plate, and then just get it to where the outer edge of your derailleur just lines up with that, with your big chain ring there. And at that point, you've got it bolted down onto the frame where you want it. From here, you want to tighten clockwise the low limit screw until the outer edge of the front derailleur is just basically flush. They say to stick a Allen wrench along the edge of the chain ring until they're basically in the same plane. Sometimes I'll go just maybe a hair beyond this. You know, it kind of saves you from having to pull the cable so tight. But once you get some practice and do it a few times, you'll kind of find your sweet spot of where you like to do it. But I've got the bolt removed here, and basically that's where the cable is gonna, you know, just to kind of show. But you'll basically have your little bolt, and there's kind of a little washer with 2 nubs on it. And so you want to just pull it tight from here. Make sure you have all the slack out of your cable there, and then you'll want to cinch it on down. And normally once that's cinched down, what I like to do at this point is just go ahead and back off that low limit screw to approximately where you think it's going to end up being, you know, as far as you have some clearance in your largest sprocket in the back and having it in your small cog there, and then you're kind of ready to test your cable tension there. So you'll want to shift it all the way up to the big ring as far as it'll go, and then hit 1 trim click down. So in that little diagram I showed, it's the top trim, so 1 micro click down. And then there's 2 lines there on the back side of the derailleur, and you got your little adjuster screw there, and you'll want to just tighten that up till those lines line up. It's a good idea to stress the cable first if you have an external cable, or, you know, maybe shift it a few times if you have internal cables. Get those lined up, and then your cable tension is going to be set at this point. So your high and low limit screws are basically independent of the cable tension, which is nice on these derailleurs, makes the setup a little easier. So from here, it's just your typical, put it in your very lowest setting there, and small cog, small ring in the front, big sprocket in the back, and you'll have just a little bit of clearance on that inside plate. And then you'll go shift it up to your you get that dialed in, shift it down to the smallest cog in the back and your big ring, and then this combo here, put it in the big donut, and then you'll want to just adjust your high limit screw where you've got just a little bit of clearance there on that outside plate, you know, maybe like 0.5 millimeter or so, just enough to where it doesn't rub. And then that's basically it for your adjustments. You run your cable down, it basically runs along, and then sometimes you got to kind of pull the derailleur out just slightly, and it'll wrap up under around, go through the little plastic piece there, little beauty cap, and put your cap on it there, and you are good to go. That's it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Had lots of complaints from my last first version of this video with the music was just irritating and nauseating. So yeah, anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Feel free to comment questions, put them down there in the comment section, and if you're not already a subscriber, you might want to consider subscribing to my channel. Got lots of other tutorials and such. So anyway, thanks for watching.